We're here, Chris Ward, the dragon tamer, trainer, the dragon master of all the masters, the grand dragon master, if I may say so. It's time for the monthly
Keep
dragon.
going,
Yes, I'll
Arnie.
never stop. This show
You're
will
doing.
take a bit longer than usual. Nice to see you, Chris. What
Lo-
what are we doing today? Tell me.
You know what? And some of our viewers might not know. This is our 20th edition. Doesn't
No
time
way.
fly? Our
No way.
20th episode, I think, today we're about to
Ah,
do. And
I
I
like
have
it.
got for you not one game, not two games,
But
but kind of
20.
not 20.
Oh,
No,
okay.
okay. I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming. I've got three games packaged up into kind of one nice little parcel with a little bow on the top,
The
basically.
possibilities.
And covering a few vital themes that I discussed, for example, Plug in my DVD originally, and topics that have recently been discussed on this site, like what do you do if White Castle's kingside? You know, that sort of stuff,
That
really.
sort of stuff.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Okay,
right. So,
everybody,
here we go.
I need
Okay.
to I
So,
need to say something, sorry,
yeah,
but you
go for it.
need to check out the news site where Chris is having all the variations we're talking about. He's taking so much care of it, like a lot of care. You know where to go to check out all the stuff there on the chess-based news site. Link is underneath the video. Now it's yours to go.
Brilliant. Okay, so here we have it. We have the Sicilian defense. Knight F3. Here we go now. D6,
Huh,
D4,
good
C
move.
takes. Here we have the good old
Very
open
good.
Sicilian. Now, stop and freeze this position because the three themes in particular that I would like to talk to you about that are going to come to fruition are as follows. Use of the C file. Okay,
Good
which I
idea.
highlight very important. Which pieces are going to want to use that C file? The rooks, no prizes for guessing that. The C4 square, such a key square to copper knight to. If the knight can reside there, then fantastico. And if not, if a rook gets there, it's going to cause all sorts of pressure against white center and, of course, facilitate the doubling of the rooks and the D5 pawn break. Added to that a little bit of tricky transpositions, and we're going to be covered on all bases today. So
Fantastic.
here we have in this particular game, just to get us underway, we have Bishop E2. Boo hiss. When this move
Boo.
comes, you tend to think, oh no, I know what's coming here. And you're absolutely right. A castling on the king side of the board. The classical variation.
Next game. Next game.
Bishop E. Don't worry, we're going to get away from this. We've got two Yugoslavia tacky things coming up.
It's so important to talk about this, of course, because it just happens.
Yeah, it happens. It's, stuff happens in life,
Yeah.
basically. And this is one of them. Now, this is the old style classical Sicilian dragon variation, which I used to get quite a lot when I was up and coming as a junior. These days, why it tends to play it a little bit more fashionably, the bishop will come to G5 with the knight out of the way or whatever. But this was the old way it was played. Now, essentially here, this is where white has a slight dilemma because black is now primed and ready to make a pawn break, pawn to D5. So white is generally supposed to do something about that. So what he can do, of course, is retreat the knight to B3, but then the bishop gets to come to E6 with the knight no longer controlling it. White could play F4, so the D5 could be met by E5, but then actually Queen B6 is quite a tricky move, which causes one or two issues for white. That's quite good. And white could also play Queen to D2, facilitating Rook A, D1. But then the downside of that is black gets access to the G4 square. So there's one or two problems with each of white's potential solutions. And in this particular game, white just played calmly the move H3. Also, you might find players have played King H1 before, so they can go F4 without Queen B6 being such a problem. And the same could apply, which is black could make the immediate pawn break, pawn to D5, which is a perfectly acceptable move. However, I like the way black plays in this game as well. Black plays a really nice takes a really nice approach to this game. And first of all, he just says, no, I'm not going to do D5. I realize, let me put it in because you're probably saying, come on, show us D5. Well, one variation might see a lot of trades in the center of the board here. after which the queen can go either to c4 or to a5. A5 being absolutely fine because although white can win a pawn here on c6 or seemingly, black is absolutely 100% going to gain the pawn back on b2, leaving white with an isolated pawn. This is supposed to be dead equal, this position here, but it could well be that black is thinking, no, I want to keep a little bit more tension in the position. I want to keep some more pieces on the board. So black simply played bishop to d7 here, facilitating, yep, you guessed it, bringing the rook to the c file.
There we go.
And here white thinks, well, what am I going to do about this situation here? He might be thinking, dreaming of bringing this bishop down here at some stage, although we know that's not going to have anything like the same impact because there's no utilizing the h-file for an attack now because guess what? White castle on the king side of the board. And of course, that's also not possible with this knight loose in the center of the board. So in this particular position, white chose to play the move knight takes c6, a move which I'm not a great fan of here. And black took back with the bishop, but in truth, other ways are possible. Taking pawn gives a perfect control of the d5 square, but you're kind of thinking, really, I don't really want the rook wants to win. So I like the rook could take, of course, because the rook wants that c4, but I like bishop takes because the rook is still not permanently obstructed, of course. And now we get a little bit of pressure on this e4 square. So now white has to defend that pawn. This is the problem. And how are they going to defend this pawn? Well, to play the move f3 here would be really ugly. Because with a pawn on h3, I mean, it might look good like in an art gallery or something like that. But when it's actual chess, you're just creating loads of holes there on g3, h4, all those dark square holes. So white played the move bishop to d3, bolstering that e4 square. And here, oh yeah. It's like this month, like actually 4 model games just like popped up in my inbox, basically, just checking around the world. And we're going to get theme number 1 into play, which is the d5 pawn break. If black can play that move successfully, then invariably it works out really well. Let's just check this move out. See, one little sneaky theme is if white was to say, no way, I'm going e5 here.
Yes.
Knight to d7,
okay.
And then f4 to bolster it. Then black has a nice little tactic. Look at this. Knight takes e5, pawn takes, and then d4.
Yes, I remember that, I think. Something similar.
With a nice little fork here, and of course this pawn is permanently weak. So after d5, with the extra pressure now on this e4 square, white took on d5. So now the knight takes back, and this is one of the reasons we like this break. All of a sudden, the bishop whips across the board here, and white's centrally posted pieces here tend to get look a tad vulnerable, particularly that dark square bishop, which of course white never wants to give away just for a black knight. So white swapped off knights, but now look at this. The queen, Her Majesty the Queen, appears in the center of the board, looking out everywhere, including, oh yeah, you guessed it, checkmate down there on g2. Oh my word. What are we going to do about that? Uh-oh. Well, there's f3 again, which looks pretty ugly. White in this particular game, this is quite a lot. I have to say I chuckled when I saw this game. I'm not going to lie. So white played f4. Okay, less because of its attacking connotations and more because it offers a bit of lateral defense over here.
And because normally white never wanted to play f3 anyway, I guess.
Yeah, f3, no. I think at least they kind of might try to kid themselves that later in the game they can go f5 and do what. To be honest, what happened in the game will pretty much happen anyway. So this pawn is now available for capture. But let's see what happened. This is super amusing. White played rook fd8, just activating the other rook, and said to white, how do you think you're going to defend? How are you going to defend that pawn on b2? So you think, well, I'm going to move it. No, I can't move it. My rook's in the corner. I'm gonna move my c pawn. Oh no, I can't do that. My bishop's undefended. Oh no, I'm going to defend it with rook a to b1. Oh, I can't do that. A2.
Oh.
So what am I going to do about it? So white chose, rook
oh,
f b1.
Terrible.
I'm just loving this game.
with
Rook
a
F3.
very,
But
very strong attack on the queen side.
yeah, so white is launching a queen side pawn assault against the black king, which is on g8. So there we go. Rook FB1. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not so happy about that. But why do we could? But on the other hand, black did just pass up last go the chance to win a pawn. But now bishop b5, of course, adds that extra pressure to this. Oh yeah, this bishop here on d3.
That's nice.
So what can white do about that? Well, of course, it can't go doing the hokey cokey and moving the b1 rook back to d1, which would be incredibly ugly anyway. So white does actually take this. Black swaps off. So we have actually got a case of opposite color bishops. However, we can see this rook is wicked on the 7th rank here. And after bishop back to d3, rook to d8, again, we have a ridiculous situation where how can white actually free up their situation with their rooks? They can't really, they can't move their b pawn. They can't move their b1 rook, and they can't move their c pawn. So upon reflection, well, let's just highlight exactly what is threatened. Also, by the way, we potentially are threatening simply bishop takes b2, rook takes.
Very nice. Yeah, I just thought about that.
So we've got a little tactic anyway. So in this game here, well, it's white actually played rook d1, and then we just took a free pawn and went on to win the endgame. So that was the theme number one I wanted to highlight to you, which was the d5 pawn break, and why it's so important to keep an eye out for it when you're playing with the black pieces. So that was game number one. Now I'm going to return you to this familiar position here, g6, and we're going to move on to the other little deviation before we crack on to the main feature short game of the session.
Okay.
So here white plays bishop e3, which you're a bit more upbeat about. You're going, yeah, I know, this is looking good. f3, yeah, absolutely great stuff.
Yugoslav.
Castles, queen d2. We're looking knight c6, looking absolutely great. Bishop c4. But now onto a system which, you know, we've done 20. When we've done 20 sessions, that's when it becomes a bit hazy as to what we might have covered and what we might not have covered.
You
before.
think it starts
but
now?
As you know, so I think 2 or 3 I can cover, but 20. So in this game here, though, instead of the normal bishop d7, black deploys a different system, which is perfectly playable actually. And that is to play the move knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and then bishop e6. What is this, I hear you say? Did you say
What is this?
Oh, right. Yeah, you did say
I couldn't because
now,
I was drinking. That's
that's fair enough. Now, so after bishop e6, so the idea is we've now eschewed the idea of bishop d7, rook c8, which is by far and away the most popular continuation, or the Chinese variation, the Salted variation, and such like, and gone for this little move here, leaving white with a little choice. Honor. Actually, this is great. I suspect this might be. Is this the first time? Did you tell me? Do you think this is the first time we've looked at this in our 20 games?
I don't know. We had bishop e6 on the board at least 3, 4, 5 times.
In main games?
I'm
not sure.
Not sure, but not in this position for sure.
Not in this, but okay, yeah. Well, obviously, bishop. I've seen the move bishop e6. It's not like out of bounds that square for the bishop, so it is allowed. So the question is, but what I really wanted to say, they're both playable. But what would be your natural instinct for white here? Would it be to defend the bishop where it stands, to drop it back to b3, or to say, no way, I'm going to take that there and give you a little weakness on e6? What do you think would be your natural inclination?
The natural would be to take it, I guess, to give the weakness. It is, yeah. If I were white, I wouldn't do it. Let's say it like that.
Oh, so you wouldn't.
I would go back to b3.
Do you know what? This is what I'm saying. That's what I love about you, Honor. You have been picking up things all along the way. So both moves are very playable. I think bishop b3 is probably the most popular. Okay. Yeah. But in this particular game, white did swap off on e6. because there are pros and cons for black of having this structure here. So the obvious pros is that black is controlling this d5 square, which we know is very handy for keeping this knight out of that square.
Yeah.
Possibly later in the game, black can achieve this. It's maybe going to be quite hard to achieve. The other option, the point is we have now got the half open f file. The obvious downside is this is undefended, this pawn, and could be targeted in various ways, not immediately obvious ways, I have to say. And the other thing is if white castles on the queen side and does achieve this bit here, then obviously black is a little bit more tender around that g6 square because of the lack of protection from an f7 pawn. On the other hand, I suppose you could argue that there is a place to run if need be on f7. So lots to consider there. But in this game, we got a little bit of a boo hiss because white just castled kingside.
Boo.
But
Hiss.
this ties in perfectly with the question. I mean, this is that had been coming on, but we'd pretty much answered that question last time around. But a similar sort of situation where white castles kingside and has this kind of structure here. What should black do about that? And the answer lies in the C file.
Mm-hmm.
So let's continue this pretty nice model game. Rook to c8. So straight away the rook comes to the half open file. This would, of course, be a poisoned pawn. Should white take that with a bishop, then b6 is going to trap it. We can always defend with knight d7, add extra, or rook c6, but that bishop will be a goner down there on a7. So white can't retake that. So white played a4 here because this is one of the things which we didn't really discuss quite as much, which is everyone wanted to say, what should black do about castling kingside when this pawn's on f3? But the other question is, well, what is white's plan going to be, by the way? You know, what is white actually doing in these sort of positions? So here white played the move a4. And let's just see how black's moves flow. They just absolutely flow nicely. Queen a5. Get the queen out, of course. So we're connecting the rooks along the back rank, defending the pawn on a7, which I suppose is kind of relevant because now white's played a4, they could play a5 to buy that bishop out of a7. Quite a crafty little idea. And now white, well, let's also look at some tactics. If white suddenly decided, no, I've changed my mind, I'm going f4 instead of f3, then that would fall foul of this nice little tactic. Knight takes e4.
Aha. That's nice. That's
because
nice.
we've got a trade of queens and that bishop will be hanging on d4. So what are they going to do? Rook f d1 was played, and black rook c4. Yes, you've guessed it. And now, because of this rook here, stop YouTube, not permanently, just pause it for now and say, what is black now threatening in this position? Can you see a little tactic?
Well, I cannot yet see the now I see the tactic. Took me a moment.
It took you. Oh, you're allowed a moment though. That's absolutely fair enough.
So I would say knight takes e4 looks very
and
convincing.
You will be again spot on. So when that rook comes to c4, it brings into play sometimes tactics immediately about taking, and other times of playing knight takes c4. So if anyone's wondering, if the pawn just took back, the bishop will be hanging, the knight will be attacking the queen, and if the knight took, we could get a trade of queens, and then we'd be able to take that bishop on d4 the same. So we would have bagged a pawn for nothing and having won the dark square bishop for a knight. Pretty good. So white has to do something about that. What are they going to do about that here? Well, the bishop retreated back to e3 and over to black.
Double up the rooks.
C8, double up the rooks. Quite right. So what are we doing with this? Well, of course, we're potentially putting pressure on c2 here. And there's just this small matter of getting through this knight here on d5. Well, white offered a little bit of support. I think tricky. In this particular game, white played rook a3 to offer some
Three.
support, but it's not really working. Knight d7. And this is the whole point. This is really nice for black, whose moves have really flowed nicely. So basically, we've got the rooks doubled up on the c file, the pressure mounting here, courtesy of the dragon bishop. And of course, the queen a5 doing its bit. And what's more is this knight is ready to get in on the act. So all of black's pieces doing some good things here. Let's see what I mean.
Okay.
Rook to b3, attacking the b7 pawn, but we take a little time out and say, okay, no problems, that's fine. Should white try rook b5, by the way, would have bishop takes c3, so that's working fine. So after b6, now white played h4. Finally, white's got to try to do something, but they're completely paralyzed, of course, with not one, not two, not three, but is that right? Four black pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4 effectively attacking that knight on c. Are they counting? We've been doing very well on that today.
Such good counting, indeed.
So finally, white got around to playing a move like h4. Obviously, there's no rook on h1 to back up and tap, but maybe hoping to kind of chip away here. But it's too little too late. Knight c5 attacked the rook on b3.
My
The poor
goodness, our rook looks so vulnerable on c4, but actually nothing is happening, right?
Well, don't forget, not only is it attacking this one here, but it's also attacking this pawn on a4.
Yeah.
The rook went back to a3, was tail between its legs, and now bishop takes c3 came in. This is just such simple, dimple chess, and we pick up a pawn here, nice and easy. Now, there's bound to be some, and now, of course, we take back that, and now we're attacking the c3 pawn. White tried to pin that knight, but we said, no, everything's under control. The c4 square, we're ganging up here. So white, some people are going to say, but I'm a bit nervous because I'm missing the dragon bishop. But you know what? They're not quite aligned to do that. And the funny thing that happened in this game, which is quite amusing, white played bishop g5 and black said, no, I'm going to defend e7 with my king. Are you sure about that? Well, we're winning that pawn check. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure because my king can always wander over here and be absolutely as safe as houses. And you know what? This game was just like pretty much domination city for black from here on in. And actually, within a couple of moves, it was just, it was all curtains, basically. It was, you know, you swap off the queens or don't swap off the queens, lose that pawn, lose all these pawns. King completely happy as Larry over there in the middle of the board. And another perfectly model. It's just like stealing candy from a baby. Do you have that phrase over there? Well, maybe I shouldn't use that phrase.
Cats.
Stealing candy from a baby. I don't know who would do that, by the way. But just so that you know. So yeah. So that's number 2. And again, that's just about utilizing the C file and then the C4 square. So
excellent.
Are you there? You're ready to move on now to the main event of the evening. Knight f3. And we're going to get some tricky transpositions because in this particular game with, how would you pronounce black's name? Pipers. Or with the J kind of. So we've got, P-I-J. How would you pronounce that one?
Which one?
The Dutch. The black player with the black pieces.
Oh, well, there's Pipers.
Well,
Peepers. Peepers.
Yeah, Pippers.
Peepers.
Pipers. Or Pippers,
Pipers.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's yeah. Well, that's not. He's a good player. Let's just put it that way. High-rated player. And he gives us another little demonstration here. But what totally shocked me this month was not one player, but 2. I keep using that phrase. 2 really strong players lost in a similar fashion in this same month. And you're going to see exactly what it is. Now, first of all, we have knight c6. And you're going, well, you're confusing me here. Because surely this is an accelerated dragon move order. And we all know the downside of the accelerated dragon move order, which is that white, should they so desire, can deploy the Maroczy bind. However, white didn't want to. Not everyone wants to do that. Bishop to g7, bishop e3, knight f6. And this is a quick reminder now, with black set to castle kingside next, that if white really is desperate to set up a Yugoslav attack here, they're going to have to do it with a bishop c4 variation. Because otherwise, if they just try the old f3 and queen d2, black is going to get that key move d5 played in one turn. So whereas, as we know, it's the main line in the 9 castles Yugoslav attack variation, black goes 9d5. Here they were basically playing the same move with white not even having castled. So obviously it's going to be really good then. So white has to play bishop c4 and monitor this particular break. Castles, bishop b3. For that reason, and this is pure general knowledge, some players that play the accelerated dragon then don't want to go d6 because it just transposes into a dragon. There are some very sneaky ideas like rook e8, e6, and d5, which is. But let's just stick with the normal thing. So d6 occurred, and white played f3, black bishop d7, and white played queen d2. So we are now into the realms of a mainline Yugoslav attack, but with white effectively having played the move 10 bishop b3 rather than castling, which is the main move, or maybe h4. So what is the downside of that move? That means black has the option, if they so wanted now, to swap off immediately on d4 and play b5 and go hunting for that bishop on b3 with a5, a4. But in fact, in this particular position, black played rook c8. So all castles queenside, and now guess what? After all that funny business, accelerated dragons, 10 bishop b3, we're actually back to a normal Yugoslav attack standard position here, with black deciding what move to play here. Knight e5 being the most common move, but in fact here we see the Topolov variation, which we have definitely looked at previously here. Now, then a number of moves that white could play in this position, including guzzling that pawn on a7, but black's playing b4 and queen a5 will follow shortly. White can try and bail out and play e5 and reach some sort of endgame position. Or the main line is to put the knight immediately into d5. I think that's what we discussed last time, one of our 20 games so far. But in this particular game, white played king b1. Now, we've discussed this move, king b1, as often being a useful waiting move, or prophylactic move sometimes in some cases, but waiting to see what black does. And it's generally a useful move. But here I'd have to say, what a waste of time. So a5, so it's not really very useful here at all, as black can play a5. Now, I do want to highlight something here. When I was first learning the dragon, I was essentially taught white can attack with pawns, boing, boing, because it's not really the pawns that are going to do the checkmate. It's getting the rooks into the game. That's what's going to do the checkmating. Whereas black really needs to attack with pieces. And the main reason for that is the first contact for a white pawn is here, a lot quicker to create a half open or an open file. Whereas these guys are back here. It's going to take a lot longer to open up lines against the white king. However, here obviously we have to factor in the fact that this bishop is simply in danger of being lost. So what are you going to do now about that bishop? That's the question.
That is the question.
Is it really in danger of being lost? And I will put it to you, well, yes, it's definitely going to get lost behind enemy lines there. So you need to do something about that. What are you going to do?
I'm thinking of a4.
You're thinking of a4, and that's why I love you. And that's why I love you, Anna, because you're like the perfect foil for these sort of things. And a4 was played, but you can see why you might not like a3 because b4a, but you're going to get that a file open. So, like that. So white played a4. A mistake, I fear. A4 is a mistake for reasons we're about to see. But it was also two quite strong players played the very same move this month here.
Really?
And this is the reason why it's a bad one. Look at this. Pawn takes pawn. What are you going to do about that? Well, you can't really take. What can you really take that pawn with the bishop? That's the question. Or do you have to take it with the knight? Well, I think if you take it with the bishop, you might find there's funny business going on down there. So you take it with a knight. Are you happy about taking with a knight?
Absolutely. Let's take it.
So knight takes is exactly what happened. But now bishop takes a4. Bishop takes a4. And I'm wondering if you can see what black move now is consistent with a theme that we have been discussing throughout this very session.
Rook c4.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Rook c4. So immediately, let's talk about what that
I
does.
love it. Yeah.
So it's attacking this bishop over here. And, oh yeah, threatening knight takes e4. So white can't just drop back the bishop back to b3, for example, because knight takes e4, and we're winning that bishop on d4, and just a clear extra pawn. Is there any way for white to deal with that? Well, the only alternative is to bail out and give up that bishop for the knight straight away to stop the knight takes e4 tactic. But we all know how dominant this dragon bishop can become. So anyway, white, what are we going to do here? If white tries to play pawn to b3, that would not, I suspect you'll be straight on the case of a little tactic then, wouldn't you?
I think so. I mean, what to do against Rook takes a4?
Exactly. Rook takes a4, b takes a4, and a choice of b8 or b6 to bring our queen to help deliver checkmate down there on b2. So presumably bishop b3 is the only choice here for white to play. The
Looks
bishop
like.
needs to go somewhere and drops back to b3. So how are we going to continue here? Well, rook to b4 might look like an obvious move, and I couldn't fault that move, but we can do better than that. Queen b6.
Sweet.
Because, of course, the b3 bishop is pinned to the checkmate on b2. And we obviously now have a very simple threat of pawn to a4. So this is how the game went. And white played queen e2, attacking that rook on c4. But the rook sidestep, and we can see now pressure is going to be mounting pretty much here. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be very much to be done about the move pawn to a4, quite honestly. So white played, well, let's give him some credit for carrying on for a bit longer. Otherwise, it would have been a bit of a poor show for us today. White played pawn up to f4, seemingly trying to block out that dragon bishop. But we said no. a4 is coming anyway. You move that bishop, you're in seriously big trouble on b2. So white played e5. Let's get rid of that. We took on e5. I suspect we've got a couple of good moves. F takes e5, and then cool as a cucumber, and I'm sure other good moves are available. We just dropped that bishop back to g7 and said, yeah, what are you doing over here still? Well, the bishop has got to move. Bishop a2, and this is super amusing. Rook takes b2 check. Okay, the king can't go to c1 because the bishop hangs, got to go to a. Now rook b8, threatening, of course. Rook takes bishop check, king takes queen to b2 checkmate. Rook b1, rook takes b1, rook takes 1, and queen to d4 check. Pawn to c3. We'll have that, thanks very much. Got to block that with a rook. Bishop takes e5. And what a nice position to finish with here. Oh, my word. Great stuff. So there we have it. The C file, the C4 square, and the D5 break. 3 model games there.
Fantastic. Actually, really, really interesting and informative, and something to keep in mind. Yeah, those patterns are reoccurring so often. And it's interesting that right now, the c4 square is completely occupied by 2 white pieces, but earlier it was just the perfect move. I wanted to say something smart. It wasn't the smartest thing, but yeah.
We give you some leeway on this, so that people will probably be confused as to that last thing. But they'll notice it. They'll say, "Oh, Chris, you didn't even mention. Normally, you talk about the dragon bishop. Of course, that's featured into it as well as like so many recurring themes throughout these 3 games. There's just if you're playing, okay, you're going to say, well, come on. When I go to playing my tournaments against my 2600s, they never play this way. But club players, a lot of them do play this way.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Chris, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We see each other next month. Looking forward to this.
Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.